Hello and welcome to A Sense of Centerville in Washington Township, your place for stories about ordinary and extraordinary residents and places in the Centerville and Washington Township area. I'm Susan from Centerville-Washington History, and I look forward to hearing your story. Today, my guests are Carol and John Kennard. Carol Kennard was with the Centerville-Washington Park District for almost 33 years, with the last 17 as director. She started in 1982 as the first program director and introduced popular programs such as Hidden Meadows and Winterwoods Day Camp. During her tenure, many new parks were acquired, and features such as the Nature Nook, skate park, dog park, and all-access playground. The Nature Nook on McEwan was named after Carol due to her contributions to the Park District. John also has been involved with the community as a GM retiree, Centerville school bus driver, and regular volunteer for both the Park District and Centerville-Washington History. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's so fun to have this chance to record history of people who have influenced our community. So I appreciate you being here. Taking on what Tobabin did many years ago with mnemonic intervals is trying to record these stories for posterity. So let's talk a little bit about you guys today. Okay. Did you grow up in Dayton? And if not, what brought you to the area?
Do you want to go first? Or?
You start.
Okay. I'm a native Daytonian. I graduated from Dayton Fairview High School, and I started working for GM out of high school because I just wasn't ready for college yet. So I worked a couple of years and was laid off and had free time. And so I started volunteering at the Allwood Audubon Center. And I was there starting in 1978. And then Carol came in 79.
All right. We'll pass the torch to you. Yeah.
So I'm not a Daytonian. And I've always said I'm from Pennsylvania, but I was actually born in Wilmington, Ohio. But we moved to State College, Pennsylvania when I was just 4 years old. So I grew up in State College, attended Penn State University, and majored in recreation and parks. And my internship for school is what brought me to the Dayton area. So I was able to get an internship at Allwood Audubon Center, where I met John.
All right, because you were volunteering.
I was volunteering, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess just the interesting thing is I was here for a week and a half, and I was in a car accident and had a severe head injury and was ended up in Good Samaritan Hospital for 13 days. During that time, John came to visit in the hospital every day, just to see how we were doing. There were a couple of us there that were in the hospital. And I always say that my mother fell in love with him first because she was at the hospital there with me too. And she got to know John at the same time I was getting to know him from a hospital bed with a shaved head.
Wow. So did you like her right away, or were you just visiting because you're a nice guy?
Well, I was both, I think. But I did feel bad for her having no family here. And the other girl was from Illinois, and she spent more than a week in the hospital too. So I, developed the friendship. And when she went home to recuperate, I would write letters and fill her in on Allwood and what was going on. And she was able to come back and finish her internship, and then things just kind of blossomed from there. So we've actually been a couple since 1980 and was married in 1982.
Okay. Well, and that's about when you started working for the Park District, right before.
The first year I was at Centerville-Washington Park District was also the year we got married.
Wow. So, yeah. All right. Well, it kind of closed the deal. She was going to come back and work here. So that's wonderful. So you talked a little bit about how you met at Allwood. Mm-hmm. Was there a program that you were leading, or just kind of as you were?
No, but I do remember the first time I saw her.
Okay.
I was answering the phone. And I saw her walking through, and I thought, I haven't seen her before. That must be one of the new interns. So I think I introduced myself and told her about the walk that I had been leading. I did a lot of things at Allwood. I led docent walks, volunteered in the store. I did outreach programs in schools and festivals. We would take animals and talk about them. And so, I would just share that interest there with her.
So it was really that you both had this common interest of the outdoors that kind of brought you together and kind of confirmed that relationship. So how did you decide on your line of work?
Well, I guess for me, it was sort of like destiny, I guess, maybe. I went on my first camping trip when I was 2 years old. And my family was just very into the outdoors, spending time outdoors and camping. Then I was in Girl Scouts, and I grew up with the Girl Scouts and worked at a Girl Scout camp eventually, and spent 2 summers working for the Boy Scouts at the Maine High Adventure Base. And so it was just like once I had that love for nature, I knew that that was something I wanted to do. And when it came time to, pick what I was going to do in college, it was pretty simple. I would go into Parks and Recreation. And fortunate that Penn State has a great Parks and Recreation program, and I was able to get into that. So,
yeah. So it sounds like it's the best thing to do the thing you love to do,
absolutely,
for your job.
Right, absolutely.
Which took me a while to find out. Like I said, I started at General Motors and worked for a couple of years and was laid off. And so then I started going to Wright State, and I continued to volunteer at Allwood. And I was a history major. So I had a professor, Dr. Carl Becker, who had written a book about the history of Germantown. And it was really the first history book about, anything like that I had read. It was very interesting. So that led me to volunteering for what was then the Montgomery County Historical Society, now Dayton History. And so I volunteered in the old courthouse downtown. And then I did some outreach programs for them, too, at the Patterson Homestead, where kids would come in. And we had a program called Touch the Past, where we put relics out and let the kids feel them. So I got that, that history bug there. And I eventually was called back to General Motors, and I didn't want to go back. I was in school. But they had a thing called the Trade Readjustment Act back then, where they gave money out for education and whatever. And I had spent like $6,000 on my college education. And they said, well, if you're not coming back to work, we want our money back. So I decided to go back with General Motors. And plus, we were a new family and looking for a home and that kind of thing. So I stayed with General Motors for 26 years. And during that time, I volunteered not only in the parks, but I was heavily involved in soccer. I was a soccer referee for 20 years. But I think that initial investment in Allwood got me interested in children. So once my GM career started winding down, and I thought, what can I do, be with kids and be outdoors and get paid for it? And that's how bus driving came up. And that was in 2006. I started driving, and I drove 18 years for Centerville Schools. And I did want to mention my first volunteer activity in Centerville was at the old YMCA, which is now the rec center. And that was before we had children, and I coached basketball and just had a fantastic time. So, started with the school district. I was there 18 years, and we can talk about that as much as you want.
Right. Well, I have to point out the wonderful pictures that your wife sent of you dressing up for Halloween as a bus driver, which I'm sure was a lot of fun for you and the kids.
It was. We had our limits. We were not allowed to do anything scary. And no masks, obviously. Couldn't cover our eyes or faces, which is ironic because we had to wear a mask for almost 2 years while driving anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
With a pandemic. But that was something I always looked forward to, and the kids looked forward to. And it was a lot of fun and a lot of responsibility, obviously. But, the biggest concern for me for 18 years was outside the bus, really. I was worrying about other people driving. And, I saw so many people doing silly things while they were driving a car. And I was very fortunate to not have really any discipline problems. I have good kids, good neighborhoods, and to get to know families, children brothers and sisters. And I'm still in touch with some of those. And, I see them in the grocery store and they remember me and I remember them. And a lot of fun.
We know all of our kids' bus drivers as well when they were little and they drove the bus. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to mention he's a recent retiree. So this is the first school year that he's not driving a bus. So I was a little bit concerned how that would be on the first day of school. But he took care of it by going to explore some history site in Indiana. So he wasn't even in town when the buses started rolling again.
Yeah. So you're staying busy.
Oh, yes. Staying busy. And I do miss it. I do miss the trips. Having the regular connection with kids is nice too. But over 18 years, I took almost 500 field trips in Indiana, Ohio, all over Ohio. I did overnight trips, academic teams, sports teams, music. And, I got to see a lot of places while I was out being paid, going to museums and parks. And so that was a good perk.
This is a great advertisement for
getting
new bus drivers.
We need bus drivers. And I did kind of feel guilty for retiring because I enjoyed it. I had good, kids, but Carol had retired. And so that was an incentive for us to be able to do more things together.
Yeah. And with your family, growing family.
Right.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So, and we'll come back to the bus driving.
Okay.
So I know there's more stories. So who were your mentors? What were the people who were your mentors? We'll start with you, Carol, first.
Well, and I guess really one of my mentors is also John's, and that was Paul Knoop, who was the education coordinator or education director at Allwood. Paul's the one who hired me first there at Allwood as an intern and actually ended up staying there for 6 months, so got an extended experience there. And, John got to know Paul, too. He is just an individual who, every time you go on a walk in the woods with him, he is so excited about nature and finds ways to really bring the excitement to whoever is in his group. So, that just really showed me how to get people excited about the natural environment, how to care about the natural environment. And, he was just really one that really early in my career really, I guess, cemented my desire to do this kind of work. Then, of course, when I was hired at Centerville-Washington Park District, Bill Yeck is the one who hired me. And
was he the commissioner at that point? Or?
He was a commissioner at that point, yes. And Bill didn't always get along with everybody because he was very strong-minded and had, specific ideas of how things should be done. But for me, he was like a kindred spirit because he grew up in the Boy Scouts. He had this love of nature. He saw the value of protecting natural areas and getting people out into those natural areas. So he was always very supportive of the programs that I wanted to get started there. And Bill himself, just what a visionary he was in the early years of the township. He fought to get the laws changed. The law was that you could have one park in a township. And he went to the state legislature. He fought to change the laws so you could have any number of parks. He was also instrumental in getting both the city and the township to develop programs whereby when a new area was being developed for housing, you would set aside a part of that for a park. And a majority of the parks that the Centerville-Washington Park District has now were acquired through that open space density, is what it was called, which didn't cost the taxpayers any additional money, but provided that green space within walking distance of the homes right there. Mm-hmm. So for him to even, look at this in the late 50s and 60s when we were mostly a farming community, and he had to convince farmers, who said, why do we need parks? We've got plenty of open space. For him to, kind of push on and make sure that we had these programs in place. We wouldn't have all these wonderful parks if it weren't for Bill.
That's right.
And it's what draws people to our community is the parks. I mean, I'm in there several times a week, and I still work. So if that's what you want to do, and there's something for everybody. There's all these paved paths for people who have mobility issues, or if you're taking a stroller. So those are, thanks for sharing about Bill.
And then there's one other person I want to mention, and that's Harvey Smith.
Okay.
He was also a park commissioner for 23 years, I think he was. Harvey is still involved in the park district, even though he hasn't been a park commissioner for years. Harvey is one of the founding members of the Centerville Rotary Club. And I mean, he's been with the club and is still active with the club. And he's not one that just attends meetings weekly, but he's on committees. He does the work of the club, and he's still working with the park district to find ways to improve the parks. And if there's a new program coming up or a new project, he'll go sit down with the current director and tell me about this and what's going on. And he's just stayed involved, even though he's not on the board anymore. So again, he's just somebody. He gave me the opportunity at the park district. He was the president of the board when I was promoted to director, and I just see all that he's given back to the community. It's just very inspiring.
That's great. No, it's not a name that I've heard, so I'll now have to do some research on him and maybe invite him over to the podcast.
Should.
Yeah, for sure. How about you, John?
Well, as she mentioned, Paul Noop was a big influence at Allwood, and I did volunteer walks, naturalist walks, and Paul would lead them and teach us. And as she mentioned, his joy at just being outdoors just took over me, and it was something that I wanted to emulate. And so I continued to volunteer at Allwood even after Carol started working down here in Centerville, but it became a 30-mile drive one way. So it opened the doors for me to do some volunteer work at her park district. And was there a volunteer naturalist program in place when you started?
No, I started the volunteer naturalist program.
Okay.
I think we had 2 volunteers the first year, plus you.
Okay. Yeah, and we'd take Girl Scout, Boy Scout troops out. And that led to me doing bird walks, flower walks. But Paul really put in motion me something that I wanted to do the rest of my life, and that was share nature with people. And in order to do that, I want to prepare. So if I have a walk to do, I'm out a couple days early, scouting around what's out there, what can I see, what can I share with people. So, and it makes me read more, and it just has really expanded my interest in the natural world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and history sounds like it's a passion of yours as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so actually that might be a good time to talk about this book. I don't know if you had planned to talk about it later, but as far as history, this is a book that you took part in helping to prepare. So this is the Normandy Farms book, and that covers the area around the Normandy Church all the way down to McEwan and what encompasses Grant Park today. So do you want to take us on that, how we planned, how you got to be involved in that committee?
I mean, that was really interesting. I'd never been on a book committee before. I think it was Florence Kraling that first contacted me and said, "We're putting this book together. Would you be interested in writing the chapter on Grant Park?" And I'm like, of course, happy to do that. Everybody took a different chapter and wrote those chapters, but then all of us were editors or proofreaders of the entire book. And I mean, I learned a lot about Normandy School, about Normandy Church, certainly about Normandy Farms and the grants that I had done some initial research on, just to be able to do some programs at the park district. But it was just really a fun. Took longer than we thought it would.
It always does, yes.
But I'm just really thankful that we have that recorded history of, where Normandy even came from. And I'm just sad to say, I know I found a picture that we did an author event at the book release, and I'm just sad to say that I'm the only remaining author from the book. So, I had the privilege of getting to work with Celia Elliott and Florence and the rest of the authors there, and just learning more about the history of our community, focusing on the Normandy Farms area.
Yeah, there's so much history in that book. I use it all the time for, things that I'm writing. So how did you get the information? Did you look through original documents?
So the first thing I did was I reached out to Bill Yeck.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I had written kind of a history of Grant Park for programs that I was doing. And so I took what I had written and I sent it to Bill. And I said, we're writing this chapter of this book. What can you add? And he, came back with lots of additions and corrections and whatever. So really the chapter there was a collaboration between Bill and I. Information in the files of the Park District. And I'm sure the Historical Society helped me out with some things too. And we did have some old pictures that we were able to put in there of when the Grant Nature Center was first in operation, and certainly talked with Ed Kramer, who was the director at the time there, and got some stories from him as well.
Right. And we talk about that in a previous episode that I had talked with Steve Huff. All right. So what are the things you like to do together?
We like to go out and visit the parks.
Yeah.
It's just like that's who we are. So we love to explore our local parks. We love to explore parks in the greater Miami Valley. We like to explore parks across the country. And even in Canada, we got to explore some new parks up there this summer. But that's just one of the connections that John and I have, is we both love nature. We both love exploring, seeing what's out there. Every time you take a walk, even if you walk the same path at Grant Park every day, you're going to see something different. Yeah. And that's one of the things we love to do. As my eyesight has deteriorated, he's the one who he finds the birds, and I photograph them.
Okay.
So that's one thing I've gotten into more in my retirement is nature photography.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
We've been enjoying going to Carillon Park and watching the eagles over the last 6-7 years there. Mm-hmm. And we'll go in the park, and kids will come up, and I'll share my binoculars with them, and then we'll actually go out and sit on the bikeway along the river there and watch them. And so that's really been a great experience following them.
It's just incredible that we can see bald eagles right here in our community pretty much any day. Uh-huh. And I think I spent the first 40 years of my life without seeing a bald eagle in the wild. So, we're just, of course, we're supportive of any and all conservation efforts, but just to see what has happened with the bald eagle in our country, it's just really special. And we could see that bald eagle every time we go out. We're still just enthralled by the majestic bird that it is.
And how big. It's
how
huge.
Big, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's exciting.
But then I also have to say, another thing we like to do together is visit our kids and grandkids.
I was hoping you were going to say that. How many kids do you have?
We have 3 kids.
And 5 grandchildren.
5 grandkids.
Okay.
So our one son, Eric, lives here in Miami Township, and he has 2 daughters. Mm-hmm. And our other son, John, lives in the Philadelphia area. He has a son and daughter. And our daughter, Emily, lives in the Pittsburgh area, and they have a daughter. So they're kind of spread out across Pennsylvania, which, makes it harder for us to see them, but gives us also travel opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And visiting families, the best way to travel.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about what has been the stories that have impacted you in your time working and volunteering with the Park District.
Getting to know the other volunteers, and I'm hoping to do much more with the history, Centerville-Washington History. I did do a program in the summer about birds. The children were building bird houses, so we thought they should know a little bit about birds before they built the houses. So I had a really good time with that. And I'm looking forward to the outreach programs, coming to the cemetery or to the Walton House. And I've talked with Carrie, and, hopefully wherever she needs me, I can fill in. And I have started doing some outreach programs for the Park District, too. I went into Stingley Elementary about a month ago, and I'm going to be going into Driscoll, taking animals in, and they have different, soil programs and animal programs. And I'm excited about that because that gives me a connection with kids again. And I'm looking forward to going into Klein Elementary because that's the school that I drove the last 15 years, the last elementary. So I'm sure I'll recognize some kids in there and look forward to seeing them.
And it's fun to be a teacher and to share your knowledge with other kids. And it makes them so excited.
It does. They're always excited to have somebody come in.
Yeah.
Someone different.
Yeah. So how about you? And stories that have impacted you?
Well, so, there's lots of stories of interaction with the public. That's really why I went into this business, is I enjoy interacting with people, getting to know people, and making sure that they have positive experiences in the parks. But the one thing I wanted to mention is the Centerville-Washington Park District is one of the top-notch park districts in the state. And we've been fortunate through levy support that has enabled the park district to hire quality staff, do wonderful park improvements, do great programs, and also, build staff. I guess one of the things that I'm most proud of is we have several former Centerville-Washington Park District staff who are now working at other agencies around the Miami Valley, Clark County, Beaver Creek, Bellberg Sugar Creek, Miamisburg. And, I know that their experiences that they had at this park district helped them to grow in their profession and be able to spread out and provide those services to people in their new communities. So, that's something that I think this park district has been very successful at, really training quality staff. And you always hate to see them leave, but it's great when they're able to advance their profession and, move up in other positions in other communities too. I think our park district is a good training ground for that.
Yeah.
Because of that.
And I'm sure you were a great mentor to those people and the staff now. I know my daughter worked for the park district this summer, and it was a wonderful place to work and to learn how to teach children and interact with the public. So,
and that's the other story I have is we have people on staff that started as preschoolers in the programs. And, I can remember when those kids were preschoolers, watch them grow up. We've had, them go off to college and get Parks and Rec degrees and come back and either work for us or work for another park agency. We even have a couple of marriages that have occurred from staff that work together, started as camp counselors and had those experiences together. And now to see those people as successful adults bringing their kids to the park programs and, sharing that love of nature that they, learned at the parks with their own
programs.
Kids.
Yeah, with the kids.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. All right, John, we're going to go back to you and talk about the challenges and highlights of driving the school bus for the city schools, Centerville City Schools.
As I mentioned, the biggest challenge was outside the bus. being aware, weather conditions. But you just never know how you're going to impact kids. I've been able to share on social media over the last 15, 18 years, whatever, stories of kids, just everyday things, common things that they would say, sharing the joys of getting braces or getting braces off, or new glasses or growth spurts over the summer, things like that. I've got a couple funny stories, but one that really impacted me, there was a middle school boy who talked to me about his dad, who was diabetic, and his dad lost his feet and eventually lost his life. And, he sat and talked to me, and I don't really remember having words of wisdom. I just listened. And so one afternoon, his mother met me at the bus with a plate of chocolate chip cookies. And she thanked me for listening to him. She said he really doesn't have many men that he can talk to. And, when all that was going on, I wasn't thinking about that. I was just listening and letting him talk. And that was an experience that moved me. But the first thing I think I recorded kids saying to me was, I had a third grader who just out of the blue said, "Mr. Kennard, do you like your job?" I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Well, you could really make more money in real estate." I think his mother was a real estate agent, and that's where that came from. And so, there was always stories. I had a boy ask me if he could, or if his dad could drive a bus, because his dad only had 8 toes. Would only having 8 toes prevent him from driving a bus? But, I've shared a lot of stories, and I always had people tell me, "You need to write a book. You need to write a book." So maybe someday, maybe I will.
Yeah. No, there's always so many things that kids say that are, they don't have the filter that we do as adults. And so it
Right.
can be very, very fun. I'm sure dinner table conversations are very interesting.
Absolutely. And it would always be fun to ask them how old, if I had a birthday come up, and I would hear everything from 35 to 95. And I did get teased about age and that kind of stuff, but I took it all in good humor.
Yeah, they have no context of age.
Exactly.
That's right. Did you have something you were going to share about?
Well, I was just going to say, you may not know this, but I have saved a file with all of those stories that you were collecting on social media. So when you're ready to write that book, it's
I
there
have an
for
editor.
you.
Okay.
She's got experience in writing books, so
It pays off.
Good. Oh, wonderful, Carol. And let's share about the Nature Nook and how that came to have your name. So, at first, it was just called the Nature Nook, and now it's the Kennard Nature Nook. Is that right? Or
Yes. It was just the Nature Nook, and I mean, it was really the first program space building that the Park District owned. And one thing I want to mention about it, of course, we've got the history of the Normandy farms there. Celia Elliott actually lived on the farm there. Gordon Jump from WKRP in Cincinnati fame lived there for a while.
The Maytag repairman.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the Maytag repairman.
From us older people.
Yeah, I know. We can't use that much anymore, can we? But this is history. So, But the neat thing about the Nature Nook when it was first developed, the architect, we talked about how this was going to be a nature programming facility. And so, of course, you have to have parking. And then we have that, big field and the woods out there to explore. So one thing that they did with the design of the building is there's like an archway. So you get out of your car, you put all your worries behind, you come up on the porch. It's a covered porch at first, but then you go under that archway and out into the uncovered porch, which opens you up into nature. So you leave all your worries behind and just go out into nature and enjoy the benefits of being out in nature. So I just want to mention that. And when we first opened the Nature Nook, we had, we're thinking we're going to have kids with muddy feet, so we don't want to put carpet down. So it was a hard surface floor, and it's got these beautiful high ceilings. Well, the acoustics were horrible. And
so echoey, I'm sure.
It was very echoey, and we're like, okay, what can we do about that? So first we put carpeting in, and then it was still kind of echoey, and we're like, okay, we need something hanging from the rafters that can, bounce some of that sound around to make it not sound so bad. We've always been fans of the artist Charlie Harper.
Mm-hmm. You've got your Charlie Harper earrings on.
I do have Charlie Harper earrings on today, but almost every day. And there's a store in Cincinnati that sells a lot of Harper stuff.
I've been to that store.
So, yes, Fabulous Frames. So I reached out to Fabulous Frames and I said, have you ever put Harper art on banners? Explained what we were doing and what we were trying to do. And they wrote back and said, well, no, we've never done that before, but let me look into it and see if we can do it. And lo and behold, they were willing to do it. Mm-hmm. So if you go into the Nature Nook, look up and you'll see there are 8 different Harper banners. So there's one on each side of each of those banners that hang up there. And the stories, so one neat thing about Charlie Harper is he always had stories about his art, and he was just clever and witty. So the stories about each of those is also on the wall there in the building. So make sure you read those.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah. I didn't realize also that they were for acoustics. So that is interesting to know. Right. And Charlie Harper, just to explain, is a graphic artist that uses like nature motifs in his graphic design. So,
yeah, I mean, he uses simplistic design.
Yeah.
That's more accurate, show details about the natural world. Mm-hmm. So he uses a lot of geometric shapes. Mm-hmm. But there's so much detail when you look closely to his paintings that you can learn a lot about an animal or a habitat just by studying the paintings.
Yeah, and pretty local. Not from the Dayton area, but not too far, not too far away.
And so when I retired from the Park District, they surprised me by renaming the Nature Nook the Kennard Nature Nook, which was just a wonderful honor, for the years that I spent there developing programs and that being our first indoor program space. It was just really meaningful for me. And then I wanted to also mention what's behind me here.
Yes, definitely.
The staff also made a quilt for me out of camp T-shirts. So, I mean, we've every year at Hidden Meadows Day Camp or Winterwoods Day Camp, you would get a new shirt or a special program. There would be a new shirt designed. So it was just really special for them to give me that quilt. It's warm. Mm-hmm. It brings back lots of good memories and just really, really was a special thing from the staff.
Yeah, and we have that red one showing because that's one I remember for my kids that they went to. So thank you for bringing that artifact. That's fun to see. Do you have any local favorite places? And we've talked about some of them, but what would you say are the highlights of your places?
Well, Grant Park and Billiac Park, and we like to go to Carillon Park. Woodland Cemetery is very interesting to me. It's a very historic cemetery and arboretum, and I'm hoping to do some volunteer work for them too. But there's a lot to see and do within a 2-hour drive of Dayton. So, our long-term plans are visit a lot of, exotic places and national parks and all that. But in the meantime, there's a lot that we want to do in a 2-hour radius. And so we'll continue to, explore what's around us.
And during the pandemic, I mean, we got out and explored parks in Miami County, Hamilton County, just kind of not having to go very far, but really just to see what else was in our area. And, we had such great visits there. We want to go back, and there are more. I mean, there's just the Miami Valley is just rich with parks and natural spaces for you to explore. We're just really fortunate here that we've had people with the foresight and then people with the knowledge and experience to try to preserve all that green space and support from residents to pass the property taxes that pay for those things. So that's, we're just really fortunate for that.
I must say we honor the history of Centerville too, with Marians and Bills. When our children come in, of course, that's, one of the first places they want to go to. So we've continued to support them for 40 plus years.
And we can't forget graders.
And graders.
Yeah.
You can find
That's
us
true.
quite often sitting outside of graders.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So why is contributing to the community important to you? You mentioned many of the service organizations that you belong to. Maybe we can cover a little bit about Rotary, Centerville-Washington Foundation, Diversity Council, Centerville-Washington Diversity Council.
Yeah.
So,
You want me to go first?
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sure.
I guess it's always been, I grew up in a family that gave back. My mom was a Girl Scout leader. It just seemed like that's what you do, which is you volunteer and you help others with their mission. And again, I enjoy being with people and getting to know the community. One of my biggest fears when I was retiring from the Park District was that I would lose that connection with the community. So they asked me to be on the Centerville-Washington Foundation board, and I thought, well, that's a good way for me to stay involved. And I've now been on that board for 9 years, and have feel like we're making a contribution to the community through funds that we raise locally and then give back to the communities locally. The Centerville-Washington Diversity Council, I've been a member of that council since it started in the late 80s or early 90s. I'm not really sure actually when it started. And we've had our ups and downs. And, at one point we thought, well, we're not getting enough volunteers to help run this organization. Maybe we should just fold. But when we sent a survey out, people say they felt it was an important thing to have in our community. So fortunately, we did a few outreach programs, and I'm happy to report that right now the Diversity Council is thriving. We've had some new people join the board, and they're workers, they're doers, they're getting things done. And we've had some very successful Voices and Stories programs. We brought that series back, and we're having more people come and become involved, which is what it takes with a volunteer organization, to have people involved with it. And then Centerville Rotary, well, back to Harvey Smith. When I became director of the Park District, he came into my office one day and he said, you really should be a member of Rotary. And up until then, I'd kind of stayed away from any service organization, feeling like the Park District, well, we work with Optimists, we work with Rotary, we, worked with all those different service organizations. And if I become a member of one, the others feel slighted. But Harvey twisted my arm, and I've now been a member of Rotary for 23 years, I think it is. Mm-hmm. And that is just it's a wonderful organization. It started as an organization of business people, but it's more than that. We have representation from all different types of people in this community. And again, our focus is on helping our community be better, the world be better. We're involved in raising money to fight polio around the world, and we continue to do that. But then we also hand out dictionaries and thesauri to every third and fifth grader in Centerville City Schools, mm-hmm. and the parochial schools too. So it's all a part of what I feel is important is staying involved in the community, getting to know more people in the community, getting to know who they are, what their needs are, and trying to do what I can just to make our community a better place to live.
Yeah, and being surrounded by those kind of people, it just feeds that desire to do more and be more. Yeah.
Right.
Did you have anything to add?
I just agree with everything she said, but also from a selfish standpoint, it makes you feel good to volunteer. And I mean, everybody can do something, in some small way or large way or whatever, but I just think it makes the community better if everyone contributes.
Yeah, different perspectives, different socioeconomic.
Right.
Yeah,
And we did make all of our kids volunteer for park programs
of course.
at one point in time. And our granddaughter, Casey, volunteered at the Rotary Pancake Breakfast last year, and she's already signed up to help again this year. So
That's wonderful.
I mean, that's to me, that's what's important in life, is making sure that you're giving back to others.
That it definitely makes a difference. People impacting the community and sharing their stories. We've talked about Bill Yak. We've talked about some of your mentors.
Let's take a moment to talk about Carol, because she won't
yeah.
talk about herself.
Oh,
But
wonderful. I'm glad that you brought that up. That's great.
now, I've just been amazed. We've been married for 42 years, and I do not know a harder working person in my entire life. Whatever she commits to, she goes full out without ignoring the responsibility of home and children and marriage.
And spouse.
And spouse, yeah. I mean, we've worked as a pretty good team over the years, but she won't mention that she has been Professional of the Year with the Ohio Parks and Recreation Association, or that she received their Lifetime Achievement Award last February. She was a Grand Marshal in the 4th of July parade. All of these committees she served on. She's worked closely with the Historical Society, with the fire department, with the school district, the library, you name it, and she's done it. And all the time, still a great mom, a great spouse.
He's going to make me cry.
Yeah. Well, you can tell that you're a great team, because it always takes a team.
Absolutely. I mean, working in the Parks and Rec business, you are oftentimes working nights and weekends when everybody's out playing. And I mean, I couldn't have done that with the support that John has given me all those years. Taking care of the kids, bringing the kids to the program. So, I didn't feel like they were missing out, or I was missing out on things either. So, I mean, he's been a very supportive partner as well, just through all of that.
Definitely. And then we have talked a little bit about retirement and what's next. What are you looking forward to?
You want?
Go ahead.
Just more travel, more time with grandchildren, riding bikes more often, just being outdoors.
Yeah. And really, I mean, exploring the parks and doing the volunteer work. I mean, that's not going to stop. That's
Right.
what we both enjoy. And, I was talking with him when he was getting ready to retire. I'm like, so what are you going to do? Because I didn't want him just sitting at home saying, you're on another committee? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just he's really already positioned himself to work with the Park District and the Historical Society. And I mean, I think that's important. We're not just going to sit at home. We get out and we explore our community and beyond, and do what we can do to make those areas better.
And yes, and you definitely have done that. So thank you so much for sharing your story today and bringing that fun quilt and telling about Normandy Farms and the people that have impacted the community. You've given me some new names to look up and to continue learning in my search to learn about history. So also thank you to MBCC for helping to produce this podcast. If you have an interesting story about Centerville or Washington Township, please contact Centerville-Washington History. Please also come visit our museums Tuesday through Friday, 12 o'clock to 4 p.m. in Uptown Centerville. And follow us on Facebook or Instagram and find out more about our events at CentervilleWashingtonHistory.org. Thank you and goodbye.